Amen. Let's read the Bible. Today's passage is 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I've heard the prayer and plea you have made before me. I've consecrated this temple, which you have built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully, with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I'll establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants turn away from me, and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? People will answer, because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them. Amen. How was your week, everyone? I'm not sure if this is a proper word to describe my week, but I want to call my past week as a lucky week. I've shared with some people here, I was driving on not the main street, around my parking lot, and I hit a car with my car. I dropped something on my passenger seat, and I tried to pick it up. And then I think I forgot to push my brake pedal. So I hit a car that was in front of me. And luckily, my car doesn't have any scratch. The car that I hit did not have any scratch. So he texted me back on Friday saying everything was fine. So we decided not to make any claims, and we decided not to make any reports. Thank God. I was pretty lucky. What about you? Did you have a good week? Was everything going well for you this week? Or did you have some stressful week? Before I start the sermon, I want to give you some things and share some things with you, since a lot of you were there when we did Holy Week on the past Monday, and some of you gave us some donations. So we had a great fun. A lot of kids loved how many chocolates they received, and I hope parents are okay with telling them stop eating your chocolates. So they had a lot of candies. We had bonfires and campfire. The fire department asked not to call it bonfire. It was a campfire, and we had a lot of fun. So thanks all for praying about it and sharing your cares with our students. As I shared last week, I want to continue to talk about the history books in the Old Testament. I did not show this table past week because of some technical issues we had. But in the Old Testament, there are two big sets of history books that talk about the history of Israel. The first set is 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. And then the other set of books, we call it 1st and 2nd Chronicles. They all talk about the history of Israel, but they are a little bit different. So 1st and the 2nd Samuel and 1st and the 2nd Kings, as you can see in this table, it's more about prophetic. I mean, it more focuses on what prophets did, because it's more about politics and history. It has strong emphasis on wars, and this set talks about both southern and northern kingdoms history, and following the history of Israel. And then what this set of book really talk about is this. It wants to talk about human failures. So if you read 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, you can easily find what fails or mistakes the kings made. So basically, if you read these books, you can really not tell any perfect king or perfect people in this book. Even David made mistakes in this book, and even Solomon made a mistake. It does not really beautify any stories of kings, but it really tells us what mistakes or failures they made. And 1st and 2nd Chronicles is more about how can we restore who we are, and how can we restore our identity, because their identity and their temple, and they lost their country by the Babylonian Empire. So there is a little bit difference. There's some differences between these two set of books. The reason why I introduced this table again is I want to draw your attention to the subject, the main theme of these sets of books. The first king that we read there's a bigger theme that the authors of this book wrote for, meaning every human fails. Every human fails. No matter how good the king was, no matter how powerful they were, no matter how sincere or faithful they were, it do not matter. What this set of books talk about is this: all human fails. And we read the history of Israel, and then maybe you are very familiar with the name of the king, Solomon. This Solomon is known as a wise king, or the wise king, because this king Solomon is known to have the wisdom that no human being can have. And then because this king was able to achieve so many things in his lifetime. And also this king Solomon wrote 2 books, and known to be a writer who wrote 2 books, we call them wisdom books in the Old Testament, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. So this Solomon was so wise that he was able to write about wisdom, and then the books had contained a lot of so much wisdoms in it that it could become a part of the Bible. And then I did some researches on this name. Believe it, if you Google name Solomon, it was not super popular name, but it was 831st popular name in the Western country. So a lot of people name their kids Solomon, expecting their kids to be wise as he, and they can become prosperous as this king was. So let me give you a brief history of Solomon until the passage we read today. Solomon was the 3rd king of Israel history. So until Solomon, Israel was one big country, and Solomon was the son of David. And when Solomon was born, Israel was going through some rough phases. Solomon's older brothers killed each other to be the successor of the Israel kingdom. However, David appointed Solomon as the next king, so Solomon was able to become a king. And when Solomon became a king, he was so happy, and he was at the same got so anxious because he was afraid of governing the country that his father was leading very successfully. So he gave 1,000 offerings to God. So here we do not know whether he made offerings for 1,000 days, or he just killed 1,000 animals for this sacrifice. We don't really know. But what we know, he gave this offering, and then and then God was pleased by these offerings. So God asked Solomon, "Hey Solomon, what do you want to receive from me?" Ask for one thing, and then Solomon said, "I want to receive wisdom from you, God." And then God was really happy with the answer. So not only wisdom, God also gave him a lot of money and got a lot of power. So at the end, we know Solomon got really popular around this region. And then if you know the maps, Israel is here, and then here's an Assyrian Babylonian empire, which became a major empires. Then here was an Egyptian empire. So for them to make some tradings, they all had to pass the land of Israel, which made Israel really prosperous. And then during this time, the other kings from around countries visited Solomon to receive consults from Solomon, because Solomon was so wise. So up to this point, and then this is what we know about Solomon. He asked what God liked, so he received a lot of wisdom. Then he was able to utilize the wisdom that God gave him, and then he was able to make Israel the most prosperous and the most powerful in its history. However, very interestingly, that is not the end of Solomon's life. That was only the half of Solomon's life. Up to the half of Solomon's kingship or his reign, he was known to be the wisest king, the best king of Israel history. But if you think about the second part of his kingship, he is described as a tyranny in the Bible. And from his life, I want us to be able to think about how we should live as Christians. For that, I want us to think about like two things. And this is how the Bible describes about Solomon's first life. He was wise, as I said. He was able to achieve a lot of things. He was able to build the temple, and he was able to build the great palace. If you do not know how beautiful it was so beautiful that other people visited Israel to have a tour to see how beautiful the temple was and how Solomon's palace was. But this is how the Bible describes his first phase of his kingship. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do. He had achieved all he had desired to do. Here I want us to learn the first lesson from this passage. In times of abundance, we may become spiritually numb because we stop listening. Let me repeat. In times of abundance, in times of fullness, in times of success, we may become spiritually numb because we stop listening. 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 1 is a very important verse in Solomon's life, because from this point, Solomon is becoming a completely different person. And here's the reason why. If you read 1 Kings chapter 3 verses 7 to 9, it talks about how Solomon asked for wisdom. And then he does not really ask for wisdom if you read the verses. So let's read it and see what he asked for. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. So God asked Solomon, okay, you did a great thing in my eyes, so I want to give you something. So what do you want? And Solomon says, God, you know, I'm not qualified for this. I'm not ready for this. So he says this, your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So as Solomon is saying, Lord, I'm not ready for this, but you have given me these many people, so I want to be a good king for these people, so this is what I'm asking for. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? So as Solomon says, he did not really seek for wisdom. He says, Lord, I'm not ready for this. I want to serve your people as a king, but for that I need something. That is a discerning heart. I want to be able to discern what is right and what is wrong. for the sake of your people, and then for your glory. And then this is how God comments on this. So God said to Solomon, since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked. And this is the wisdom that God gave to Solomon. I will give you a wise and discerning heart. So the wisdom in Hebrew is hokmah, meaning skillfulness or knowledge. So we often think Solomon was smart. He had all the knowledges of the world. That's why he became a wise king. But if you read this passage really, that's not what God gave him. What God was pleased with Solomon and what God gave to Solomon was not knowledge or was not skills. He gave the heart so that Solomon was able to discern what is right or what is good and what is wrong and what is bad for God and for his people. In order for you to discern, you have to be able to listen. If you want to discern what is right and what is wrong, you must be able to know what is right and what is wrong. And for you to be able to tell what is right and what is wrong, you must be able to listen to what is right and what is wrong. So in order for you to listen, you have to have an open heart. And you have to be able to listen to God to discern what is right in the eyes of God, because God is going to tell you what is right. And if you want to decide something for the sake of your people, you must be able to listen from your people too. So you not only listen to your God, but you must be able to listen to your people. So the wise and discerning heart for Solomon was not just a heart. If I connect this to the Greek way of thinking, heart was a place where you think. It's not so when ancient people, when they were thinking about thinking, when they were thinking about reasoning, they were not doing it with their head. They were doing it with their heart. And then they were feeling from their guts. So what God gave him was, God gave the ability to Solomon so that he can think what is right and what is wrong. And then also, he was able to make decisions what is right and what is wrong for God and for his people. And for that, God gave him the ears that he was able to listen to God and listen to his people. But if you think about how the author of 1 King talks about Solomon's lifetime, as we read earlier, he says this. All he had achieved. Okay, he had achieved, but this is what it says. All he had desire to do. It's not what God's people have desire to do. It's not what God has desired to do for Solomon. What the author of 1 Kings says is this. After Solomon have achieved what Solomon had desire to do. This is why it became a turning point in the life of Solomon. He is not listening to God. He's not listening to his people anymore, because as time goes by, he was getting obsessed with his architecture and constructions. As time goes by, he spends more time and human power to build greater constructions in his time of reign. And do you know what happens in the future? Solomon made a law for the slaves. God said, do not have any slaves. But Solomon made all the foreign people in the land of Israel their slaves. Why? So that he could use them for his construction. And furthermore, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Why? Because he was getting obsessed with himself. He started listening to his own desires other than listening to God and listening to the cries of his people. His people were crying because he did not care about what is right or wrong for his people, but he only started caring about his own. He began to become a tyranny instead of a wise or godly king anymore. And if you apply this in our life, these same things are happening in our lives too. Let's think about when we start working on the new projects or when we start working on the new challenges. We cry out to God because we feel anxious or we are so unsure of what is going to happen. And then we come to church or we ask for prayers more and more. And then during this first phase of our challenge or first phase of new start, whenever we make very small progresses or whenever we make small successes, we become happy and we become so grateful. But as time goes by, when we get used to it and when we become more like master of our works or new challenges, we are not getting desperate anymore, that we are not praying to God anymore, and we don't feel grateful anymore because we are so used to it. We often ask for help when we start something new, but as time goes by, we lose our desperation. We're not grateful anymore. We are not grateful anymore whenever we think about the cross. We are not grateful anymore whenever we worship God because we are so used to this. Then here's the next question we can learn from Solomon. How can we maintain our faith before God? How can we keep our desperation for God? And then I want you to remember this. When we stop our daily spiritual routine, we stop growing. If we want to maintain, if we want to keep the spiritual status where we are, we have to try harder and harder and harder every day. This is what God says to Solomon in verse 4 and 5. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully, with integrity of heart, and with uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. In Hebrew, faithfulness meaning unchanging. If you want to be faithful before God, you become unchanging in the eyes of God, meaning if you decide to live for God in this way, you keep this way until you die. That's what faithfulness means. And one of the Bible passages says, God's shadow is not even shaking because God is that faithful. God never changes. God is God no matter when and no matter where He is. God is God. Then here's the thing. How can we stay faithful in our lives? And in order to explain this, I want to very roughly explain my fitness journey. I work out 6 days a week, and then some people around me ask me, do you ever feel sore? I don't feel sore anymore. But if you, around Thursday or Friday, you feel heavy instead. The reason is because every day, the loads of damage in my body is getting stocked, so I feel heavy and sore. Even for workouts, if you do the same workouts over and over and over, you may feel sore first for 1 week or two, and your body doesn't feel anything from it. Same for our spirit too. If we repeat the same things over and over and over without being intentional about it, we don't really feel anything from it because our body is getting used to that and our spirit is getting used to that. I want to show you a picture real quick. It's me. This is a picture one of my friends took me after I PR'd my lifting. It was my personal record that I've never tried before. And then in order for me to hit this lift, there's one secret I had. Some people think like when you try to get better in exercise or when you try to get better in some aspects, there are some like hidden secrets that you have to do. But actually, in order for you to be better, you have to focus on the very small things and then you repeat it on a daily basis. That you change it little by little. Because that is what training is about. When I say we have to keep and repeat our spiritual routines, I'm not only talking about we have to do the same things over and over and over. In order for us to follow our spiritual routine, it's not just about doing it. We have to spend a lot of energy on that. Modern days, people are having more stuff to do, busier life and busier schedule to do. So for us to fit our daily spiritual routine in our daily lives, take a lot of sacrifices too. We have to give up some important things in our life to do so. And then it gets worse and worse because we are getting busier and busier and busier every day and as time goes by. Parents are getting busier, students are getting busier, young adults are getting busier as time goes by. So for us, in order to maintain our spiritual routine, it's not just doing the same things. We are getting more intentional every day in order to practice our spiritual routines. Do you know what happens when you are training, when you decrease the amount of trainings? Or if you just do the same trainings over and over and over, you're not growing. You're actually getting worse. In order for us to maintain our fitness level, we have to increase our training little by little every day or on a regular occasions. So here I want us to think about this. If you have met God in the past, if you really had that strong and very passionate heart before God in the past, let's go back to that time period. When you are really passionate before God, when you are ready to give yourself before God, how was your life like? What did you do on a daily basis for God? And let's move to today. What do you do for God? In order for us to maintain our fitness, in order for us to maintain our strength or to grow stronger or better, as I said, we have to try harder. But what do we do on a daily basis? Do we pay attention to the very basic stuffs every day? Reading the Bible, sharing God's love with one another. One thing that I want us to keep in mind as we think about our spiritual journey is this. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. 2 Timothy is known to be one of the last letters that Paul wrote. He wrote this letter to a guy whose name is Timothy, who was one of his favorite students or the best students. And this is what Paul says, I'm almost ready to die. I have fought a good fight. I have finished the race. When we hear the word race, we think about short distance, sprinting race. But this race in Greek is a marathon. It's a marathon. Our life is a marathon. Solomon's life was a marathon. But when he only paid attention to the one spot, and he was obsessed with his past success and stopped working on his spiritual routines on a daily basis or whatever, he ended up losing his focus on God, but he started focusing on his own desire. That we stop doing our daily spiritual routines, that we stop practicing spiritual disciplines is not just about stopping what we are doing. It is actually by stopping it, we are opening the door to our temptations to enter. Because when we are losing that intentions, we are losing that focus, we will want to focus on something else. We talk about meditations a lot. We have to meditate the Word of God day and night. We have to meditate God's words day and night. And then also other religions talk about meditations. But there's a big difference between Christian meditations and non-Christian meditations. Non-Christian meditation says you have to empty yourself first to feel something good in you. But what Christian meditations are saying is not you have to empty yourself. You have to let God fill you so that you can replace what is in you with God. It takes time. It takes time. And it takes a lot of practices. Because we are going to continue to fight in us. Maybe next day we are going to feel spiritually fatigued, spiritually sore because our spirit is not used to it, but we do it again. Then we do it again. Then we do it again. Then one day we will figure out that God has been filling us to the fullness, and that we are not belonging to the world anymore. This is what Solomon was missing. We can maybe be spiritually successful today. We may have achieved a lot of great things as a Christian or as a person today. But if we don't try hard to maintain it, we will end up losing everything as Solomon did. And you know what Solomon confessed right before he died? He said everything is in vain. And then at the end of Ecclesiastes, after he has followed everything that he has desired for, this is what it says. Everything is in vain, but one thing remains, is our God. Why did God tell us this story of human failures to us? Why does God tell us the failures of the wisest king of the human history? It's because God wants us to know this. If we leave God, if we let the evil enter our hearts today, now, even the wise king can fall. Now we are leaving the building, going out to the world. Is there any changes you want to make to grow spiritually in God? And what are they? And how can you apply this to your life? And what changes can you make? So here are the questions I want us to think about. The first question is this. What spiritual routine do you have? And how much efforts do you put to keep that routine every day?